So as we begin the presentation tonight, I just wanted to ground us with a few facts and some background about Rta Transit Police, where we've been in the past and where we are now. So RTA currently employs over 120 transit police officers. This is 5 times as many cops that they had when they were founded in the 1970s. And ridership today is less than half of what it was at that time. So over 500% increase in police, while ridership is less than half of what it was then. Just to compare to another city close by, Pittsburgh, they have much higher ridership and they have 50 transit police compared to over 120 officers here in Cleveland. Our budget for RTA Police every year is $14 million, and that budget has doubled in the last 15 years. These numbers are stunning. So I'd like you to keep these in mind as we have our discussion throughout tonight. And I'd like to take another quick minute to talk about our Fair Fares platform. If you can go to the next slide, great. So Fair Fares, Clevelanders for Public Transit, released in 2018. If you haven't seen it before, I'd encourage everyone to check out our website, clevefortransit.org/Fair Fares. You can check out the full platform there. But basically back in 2018, we realized there was an endless death spiral of higher fares, reduced transit service, and more service cuts. And we had to stop this death spiral. So in 2018, we released our Fair Fares platform, and we viewed these as reforms that RTA could start implementing immediately to stop the transit death spiral. Basically, we called for RTA to make transit better by reinstating cheaper fares like $5 all-day passes, which was a victory we just won a few weeks ago, got those all-day passes rolled back to $5. We also called for low-income fares, and we wanted a levy in November of 2018, which ultimately did not happen, unfortunately, but we're still pushing on those fronts. Through that campaign for a levy, RTA had agreed to do some studies, including a system redesign study and a fare equity study that called for a lot of similar things that Fair Fares have called for, like bringing back transfers and fare capping. So with that said, we're still kind of pushing on these issues. The fare equity study that RTA did, even though it had some similar recommendations, did not address fare enforcement at all, didn't even include that as part of the study. And as part of Fair Fares, we recommended fare decriminalization within the city of Cleveland, and also the use of civilian transit ambassadors, which was also recommended by the court ruling we'll be discussing tonight in 2017, a few months before the Fair Fares platform was released. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Josiah from Black Spring, Cleveland.
Yes, my name is Josiah. I am proud to be here today representing Black Spring, Cleveland. We are a Black-led abolition organization seeking to reimagine what it really means to have public health and safety within the greater city of Cleveland. We believe in education, we believe in bottom-up change, we believe in inclusion, and we believe in community. And
like
by nourishing
app or an HDMI cord.
And
what if
reminder, everybody, put yourselves on mute. And we believe that together that we can protect ourselves and care for ourselves in ways that do not require militarized state violence. in July, we launched, well, in August, actually, I believe, we launched our Abolish the Overlap campaign, which set about to begin the process of breaking down the overlapping jurisdictions and police forces within the city. There are over 11 police forces operating, both public and private, two of which are those operate within CMSD schools and the Regional Transit Authority. So our first two that we chose to tackle were these two. And our goal was that we knew that a lot of people within these systems were very vulnerable. Our children, some of the most impoverished and homeless as well, and creating contact points of care rather than contact points of trauma. So we engaged in this relationship with Clevelanders for Public Transit, and are proud to have come up with a plan that we think can work quite well in both limiting the damage of placing people within the justice system and that cycle, which tears apart communities and families, as well as saving money through the redundancies to better serve the populace of Greater Cleveland. So our plan is, if we hit the next slide, is to establish a safety plan which incorporates unarmed, undeputized civil ambassadors to oversee the safety of our riders, that no police or militarized bodies may actively patrol the RTA buses or trains, that there be no plainclothes detectives, quote unquote, investigating on RTA buses or trains during operation, that any on-duty officer that steps onto RTA property must be clearly marked, that regular canine sweeps of RTA property must cease immediately and only be carried out with a warrant. The enforcement of fare evasion will be the responsibility of these civil ambassadors previously mentioned. The immediate decriminalization of fare evasion in perpetuity. Fines for evasion also should cease. The removal of police from the RTA budget and the reallocation of funds to pay for cheaper fares and expand RTA service, and the creation of the Civil Ambassador Program. So that is the basic outline, and we hope, well, we know that through direct action, through education, and through community building, that CPT and BSC will be doing this work, and we hope that RTA will join us in this work. And with that, I will pass it right along.
Thank you. So now with the context of our organization's and goals in mind, I want to take us back 3 years ago to the reason that we're here today. This week marks 3 years since Judge Manuela Groves held that RTA's fare enforcement policy was unconstitutional. In fact, I want to acknowledge at this point that we have Judge Groves in the audience. Thank you very much for joining us. I do have a summary of the case here, but if Your Honor would like to add anything, please feel more than free to do so. And I didn't see whether we had Attorney Hardiman, who represented the defendant on appeal in the audience, though I believe he had RSVP'd. If you are in the audience, Mr. Hardiman, feel free to join in as well.
Can you see and hear me? I am here.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you very much for joining us. Like I say, if either of you have anything that you want to add, do please feel free. Um,
Okay.
so in the summer of 2017, Ronnie Williams wanted to take the health line. He attempted to buy a ticket from a vending machine at Superior and Euclid. The machine was broken. So Mr. Williams got on without getting a fare ticket. He paid his fare on the bus where the operator could not print proof of payment. 2 RTA cops started checking every rider's ticket. When Mr. Williams could not produce one, the cops pulled him off the bus and cited him for fare evasion. So Mr. Williams found himself facing the possibility of 6 months in jail and a $250 fine because the ticket machine wasn't working. Mr. Williams thought that was wrong and decided to fight it in court. Judge Groves eventually agreed with him. She said that while every person must pay their fare, that does not obliterate our basic constitutional protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. In essence, Judge Groves held every person has the right to ride the bus or train in peace and without police disturbance. The cops can infringe on that right only when they have an individualized, articulable reason for suspecting a specific person is guilty of fare evasion. She said, mere presence on the bus is insufficient evidence to stop all passengers on a particular bus or rapid train for investigation of fare evasion. But that's exactly what RTA policy made its cops do. For Mr. Williams, this meant he never should have been cited for fare evasion, since the cops did not have the right to stop him in the first place. As an alternative to fare enforcement performed by armed cops, Judge Groves suggested civilian personnel. These non-law enforcement officers serve as an intermediary between police and passengers to prevent arbitrary and abusive police encounters, according to Groves. RTA hasn't taken the judge's advice, though. Instead, the agency's decisions have inconvenienced riders and failed to address the underlying issues of justice at stake in the case. So for more on that, let's take a look at how the Healthline works post-Groves.
All right, thank you. This is Chris again. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the Healthline, and before I get into that, I wanted to see if Judge Groves or Mr. Hardiman have anything to add.
Well, I see that under my picture is Judge Groves' name. So to set the record straight, this is James Hardiman. I'm the attorney that represented Ronnie Williams back in 2017. But I think the story starts long before 2017. Back in 2010, I was employed as legal director for the ACLU of Ohio. At that time, you may know or heard of George Forbes, who was the president of the NAACP. We had a meeting with the RTA relative to the racial impact of enforcing the fare evasion ordinance on the Healthline. The plain dealer had come out with a story that said that something like 80 to 85% of the people that were ticketed and cited on the Healthline were African Americans. We took issue with that. We met with RTA, and basically they said that it was not their intent to discriminate. It just happened to be where the Healthline was located, from East Cleveland into downtown. And if a disproportionate number of African Americans rode the Healthline, then understandably, a disproportionate number of African Americans would be cited for fare evasion. They estimated that something like 7 to 8% of the people that ride the RTA Healthline were in fact fare evaders. evaders. Ronnie Williams was not a fare evader. The RTA was not able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he actually attempted to evade fare. The only thing the RTA was able to prove was that he did not have a ticket. And not having a ticket is a long cry from being a fare evader. As Judge Groves ruled under the landmark Terry versus Ohio decision, and some of you may recall Terry, it was handled by Lou Stokes back in the 60s. And under Terry versus Ohio, the US Supreme Court said that police do not have the right to conduct any kind of stop or search or even encounter unless they have articulable, individualized suspicion of criminal activity, basically reasonable suspicion. If they don't have reasonable suspicion, they do not have the authority to stop, to question, or to conduct a search. Of course, reasonable suspicion is less than probable cause. And without getting into many of the nuances, the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, not all searches and seizures, just those that are unreasonable. The policy that was employed and apparently is still in place at RTA authorizes the RTA police to conduct searches or seizures, not searches, seizures, based upon reasonable suspicion or probable cause. But just because a person is on an RTA bus, Judge Groves ruled that such a policy was unconstitutional and in violation of the Fourth Amendment. That issue is still an ongoing issue. And though RTA assured us back in 2010 that they would consider making fare evasion a civil penalty as opposed to a criminal penalty, that has not yet happened. In Ronnie Williams' situation, he decided to take it all the way. Now, let's be realistic. These are misdemeanors. And for the most part, people cannot afford to hire high-priced attorneys to represent them for fare evasion cases. That was the situation with Ronnie Williams. He attempted to represent himself, and he was at a disadvantage because the city of Cleveland had its prosecutors representing RTA. However, Judge Groves looked at the facts and came to the conclusion that one, they hadn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Ronnie Williams was engaged in fare evasion. But two, the policy employed by RTA was unconstitutional and a violation of the prohibition against unreasonable searches and seizures. This issue, at least in my opinion, will come about again. And hopefully when it rises again, there will be a solid record and the Court of Appeals will be in a position to make an informed decision affirming Judge Groves' opinion and ruling that the RTA policy is in fact unconstitutional and a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, I could go on, but I don't want to take time away from the other presenters. Telling an attorney he has the floor is always dangerous because we can go on and on and on, which I would prefer not to. So
we definitely appreciate your insight. And Judge Groves, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add as well.
Well, you know, I appreciate the fact that the case is still being discussed, but as a judge, I just think that it's important to have, you know, the attorney involved to discuss it. I am a candidate for the 8th District Court of Appeals, and I hope to join them in February. So I just want to be very careful in terms of, you know, having any additional input other than what the opinion itself states. And I would defer to Attorney Hardiman as it relates to any details or questions that anyone may have.
I certainly appreciate that.
I think it's important to note, however, that very seldom do municipal court judges write opinions on cases. They deal primarily with misdemeanors, and in many cases, constitutional issues are not addressed. I think in this instance, however, Judge Groves saw the constitutionality or the unconstitutionality of what RTA was doing and wrote a detailed opinion, which I had the privilege of defending in the 8th District Court of Appeals.
Certainly do appreciate that. You know, to me, it's so important that is so much a matter of fundamental justice. And to be honest, it is also everyday concerns, which I think if Chris Stocking, if you want to talk more about the health line.
Sure.
Can I,
sure.
before you do, can I ask Attorney Hart case that deals with the mere absence of fare and whether there's that proof of fare and if that constitutes
Sure.
evasion?
The ordinance prohibits fare evasion. Just because a person does not have a ticket does not necessarily translate into fare evasion. There's no proof in many cases that they actually actively intended to avoid paying the fare. So that if they did not or do not have a ticket, there's a big jump between not having a ticket and saying they actively evaded the attempt to pay the fare. And what the city of Cleveland has been doing, and Judge Groves in another decision ruled that just because a person doesn't have a ticket, it does not translate into fare evasion. Now, if they want to change the ordinance and require that any person who doesn't have a ticket is guilty of a crime, that's an entirely different situation. I question the constitutionality of such an ordinance, but that's not the ordinance as currently written. The ordinance as currently written deals with fare evasion, and the city attempts to prove fare evasion by proving that they don't have a ticket. Well, in Ronnie Williams' situation, he didn't have a ticket. His version of the facts was that he had paid the fare, but the fare box was malfunctioning. If it's malfunctioning, then the only way to prove that he was attempting to evade the fare was for someone to be at the station where he boarded the bus. The police officers weren't at the station. They boarded the bus, I think, or I'm sorry, I keep saying bus, I mean train. They boarded the train at 120th, if I recall correctly. Ronnie Williams got on the train at Superior and Euclid. So in Judge Groves' other opinion, she ruled that not having a fare card was not the equivalent of evading fare. And since the obligation is on the state, or in this case, the city, to prove each and every material element beyond a reasonable doubt, very seldom, unless they see the person actually enter the RTA train, can they establish that the person intentionally attempted to evade paying the fare. So I think these two cases that were decided very close in time established that the policy employed by RTA and the proof that is always, or in most cases, presented by RTA is not sufficient to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that a person evaded the fare. But even if it were, there's some serious question as to the constitutionality of approaching a person unless the police officers have some individualized, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. That hasn't happened in the cases that I've been involved with. But I think going forward, we're going to have to take a long, hard look at this policy by RTA. First, the policy by which they translate not having a ticket to fare evasion. And secondly, the constitutionality of unreasonable searches and seizures by RTA police officers.
Well, that certainly sounds like a good idea, and I think kind of related to it, we are calling for the decriminalization of fare evasion for concerns such as these. So I do really thank you, Ms. Hardiman, for your contribution.
Thank you both. That was excellent. I appreciate you joining us tonight. This is Chris Stocking again, the chair of CPT. I just wanted to talk for a minute about how the Healthline was supposed to work to benefit riders and how it works today. So you can see some information on the slide showing some pictures of the Healthline bus rapid transit system along Euclid Avenue from Public Square to East Cleveland through University Circle. The Healthline was Cleveland's first bus rapid transit line, and it opened in 2008 with national recognition. At that time, it was the best bus rapid transit system in the country. $197 million was spent to completely tear up Euclid Avenue, to put in new bus-only lanes and transit priority bus signals along the road. And it's been stated that over $4 billion was pledged in redevelopment along Euclid Avenue since the Healthline has opened. You can see in the picture on the left-hand side, there's platforms that were built in the middle of most of Euclid Avenue. And what those platforms allow you to do is board the bus similar to a subway. It's very simple. The bus pulls up, all doors open, 2 or 3 different doors. You step on, the doors close, and the bus moves, just like you would if it was a rail system. That's why Cleveland spent $197 million to make this system efficient, to move riders quickly, to be able to run buses more often because you save time. The buses can turn around faster and start their next route. You save on costs. A fast bus is a happy bus, right? So that's what the Healthline was designed to be. And in order to enforce the fares, instead of having to go up and pay the bus driver, you had fare machines at each station or platform along the route. And as we heard about in the court case, the fare machines were broken. So Ronnie Williams was not able to purchase a ticket with those machines being broken. But what it's meant to be is you purchase a ticket, the doors open, you get on and the bus moves. And how they did that enforcement was with transit police randomly checking fares. And we've heard about some of the issues with that. We could go on to the next slide. So this is what it looks like now. So RTA officers are no longer doing the proof of payment or the fare inspections, which is a good thing because it's reducing interactions with police. The problem with removing proof of payment is it creates big delays for riders on the Healthline. These buses are specially designed buses. Actually, if you could go back one slide, you can see a picture of what the buses look like in the bottom right corner there. You can see that they're specially built buses. They're actually built just for Cleveland for the Healthline, and they have doors on the left-hand side of the bus behind the driver. So when that bus pulls up to a platform, those doors open and you're actually getting on the vehicle behind the driver, as opposed to most buses when you're getting on right next to the driver on the right-hand side. So that's what this is a picture of, is getting on that door on the left. And you can see, you know, how hard it is to fight your way up to the front to pay your fare on a crowded bus. And this is everyone getting on at Public Square. It's the highest ridership stop of the line. And it's a big problem, especially with COVID-19, because there's no way to social distance this process. You are shoved together, you can't keep your distance, and it negates the time benefits of spending $197 million on the Healthline when you have these delays constantly. And when you have people in wheelchairs and people going to the grocery store with their carts and people with bikes. It's impossible to get up to that operator. And so a lot of times they'll start moving the bus when you're still trying to stand and get seated. I've seen people fall over that are trying to use their walkers or rollators, elderly folks that need transit. This is not how the system was meant to work. This is not why we spent $197 million tearing up Euclid Avenue and installing platforms in the middle of the street. This is a disgrace to the city of Cleveland and the thousands of riders that rely on this line. And you can see it in the ridership numbers. Ridership fell 3 times as fast on the health line between 2017 and 2018 than bus ridership. Ridership on the health line was down 15% after the removal of proof of payment. So it's really important that we restore proof of payment, but we do it in a way that's constitutional, or we find a way to get the benefits of all-door boarding, how the system was meant to be used, but without criminalizing transit riders and doing it in a way that works for everyone. So with that said, I'll pass it on to Cameron to talk a little bit about crime statistics after the court ruling.
Thank you, Chris. And hi, everyone. My name is Cameron. I've been helping Black Spring and Clevelanders for Public Transit research into the RTA police force for the past few months. We've been calling on the RTA to defund their police and invest into better services for riders. But the RTA told us back in June that they cannot reduce the police budget. They claim that the police keep riders safe and are there to reduce crime. I want to take a moment to address both of these claims. So, as was very well explained right before me, the Groves decision ruled that police cannot enforce fare evasion on transit anymore. And in the state of Ohio, fare evasion is a criminal offense. Now, following this decision in 2017, we saw the number of reported crimes on transit drop from just under 6,000 in 2017. That fell to 260 the year after that. So from what we were able to find based on the public data RTA provided on crime statistics is that 99.5% of the reduction in crime was due to the changes in fare evasion. The just around in the mid 5,000s was the number of fare evasion cases that happened. So the vast bulk of crimes that are happening on transit right now and back in before the Groves decision were fare evasion. The RTA told us that the police over 2012 to 2019 reduced crime by 65%. I think when most people hear that number, they would think of something more serious than passengers not paying a $2.50 bus pass. I don't believe many riders would consider that a reason to have such a vast police force that the RTA Police currently has. And over the same period from 2012 to 2019, we saw the police budget increase every single year. We have seen the police budget double in the past 14 years. And now, what these numbers should tell us is not that the police are helping reduce crime, it's that the police, the way they enforce crime is in fact unconstitutional, and we do not need to have as many as we have on public transit. They don't have a role to fill anymore, and we want to see the role that they were filling be done by the transit ambassadors. And yeah, that is why Black Spring and CPT are working together to get funds away from the police and into improving services. Right now, we're seeing that the RTA is in a downward spiral. We're seeing fares continue to increase. We're seeing ridership get reduced. There needs to be some sort of stimulus brought into the system that can help undo those changes. And if we were to take the bloated police budget and dedicate that towards improving services such as expanding routes, having routes to go to more places, and reduce the cost of a fare, we believe that we will start to see riders return to Cleveland's public transit. Now I want to hand it over to Dana to speak on fare evasion and the criminalization of it in Ohio and in Cleveland.
Thanks, Cameron. So as was discussed before, Attorney Hardiman had mentioned, and Cameron, thank you also for explaining these things so well. In the city of Cleveland, as well as the city of East Cleveland, there are city ordinances which categorize fare evasion as a misdemeanor of the 4th degree. So that is a minor crime, but a crime nonetheless. It is also a criminal misdemeanor under Ohio state law. And all three of these ordinances and the law are pretty similar in language. What they do is pull riders who are not able to pay their fare into the criminal justice system. This means that if you are unable to pay your fare, or if you have, in some certain situations, you have forgotten to show the pass that you've already paid for, or that has already been provided to you. If you fail to show that and you are cited with fare evasion, you will be brought in front of a judge, perhaps maybe someone as nice as Judge Groves here, but maybe someone less empathetic. You face a criminal record. You could have up to 6 months of jail time and up to $250 in fines. And that is all just for failing to pay $2.50, which is the price of a one-way bus pass. Decriminalizing fare evasion in Cleveland is essential to creating more equitable transit and a more effective justice system. And I'm going to quote Kerry McCormick here, who's a Cleveland City Councilman with Ward 3. He and Councilman Zone, as you can see in the picture here, were gracious enough to attend our Heal the Healthline event last October. And they were promising that, they'll start working on some legislation to get this decriminalized here in Cleveland. So this is a quote from Mr. McCormick from this summer, while he was still drafting that legislation that we're hoping will be introduced soon. Current fare enforcement is clogging up our criminal justice system with folks who simply don't belong in it. This is an example of one of the laws on our books that is simply unjust. It doesn't make sense, and we need to correct it. And I don't think there's a better way to say that. I should also point out that fare evasion, just like a lot of petty crime, is used to target a lot of Clevelanders of color, a lot of people who are low income, below the poverty line, people that may be unhoused, people that may be having mental or physical health issues, and people that need help and don't need to be put in the criminal justice system. So I am going to turn over now to, transition over to talking about what other cities are up to in this realm. So when Judge Groves called for fair evasion to be conducted by unarmed civilian personnel, she was not reinventing the wheel. These are roles that have existed in one form or another within transit agencies for decades. They, in some cases, started a little ad hoc, a little vigilante, like our friends in New York City, who have the Guardian Angels, which have been a volunteer independent patrol group that have been ensuring safety in their subway system since 1979. Um, uh, a little bit more professionalized in other places. We have San Francisco, who their municipal transit agency, SFMTA, has had transit ambassadors on their buses since 1995, who are specifically people who are hired from the local neighborhoods and used to de-escalate and communicate with at risk youth, pardon me, who are riding their buses to and from school. Again, that's been going on since '95, and now the BART system, also in San Francisco, is expanding its transit ambassador program as well, um, uh, or to hire more transit ambassadors to take the place of some of their police force. In Seattle, the Sound Transit is currently expanding duties of their civilian fare enforcement officers to include de-escalation and other community outreach tactics. We have not mentioned on this list here, we also have pictures here from transit ambassadors in Boston, who are also in charge of doing fare enforcement, helping people figure out how to use the vending machines, telling people where to go on, with their routes, where can I transfer to here. And then you've also got a picture of a Denver safety ambassador, and they are more concerned with the public safety aspect rather than purely for fair enforcement. But again, we have civilian transit ambassadors that come in all shapes and sizes and have done so for many, many years. And then the last shout out we have is Ride KC in Kansas City is incrementally doing away with fares altogether. So fare enforcement will not even be a need once they have all their routes become fare free. And with that, I'm going to send it back over to Cameron, who is going to talk about what transit ambassadors should look like here in Cleveland.
Thank you, Dana. You brought up a great point that we are not leading the way in this charge. There are other cities that have implemented these transit ambassadors that fill the role that we would like to see them filled in Cleveland. We are calling on the RTA to create a position for transit ambassadors, which are public unionized employees that will be working for the RTA. We do not want this outsourced to any private security firm. We want them to be supported by this community. And so there should be a few, okay, perfect, there they are, thank you. The most important factor, in addition to being unionized public employees, that's number one, we want these transit ambassadors to be non-deputized and to be unarmed. There are not enough places where riders have experiences with RTA employees that are like, the police occupy a very large presence. We do not need to have one of the primary interactions riders have be with someone who is carrying a weapon and has the power to arrest them and put them in jail. That does not create a healthy environment for our riders. These workers will be available to explain the fare system and assist customers in purchasing fares, which can help prevent cases of fare evasion from ever happening. Because a lot of time, it is just not particularly clear how to pay on the RTA. Like, it's very easy to make that mistake. They will also be able to provide information on bus, rail, and BRT routes, thus improving the experience for riders, helping riders learn how they can incorporate themselves into public transit and begin making use of it and begin seeing people come back. They will also be available to listen to riders and collect feedback and be the eyes and ears of the RTA on public transit. This is necessary for the RTA to be informed about the experiences of their riders and thus be able to craft a policy that can adequately represent their interests. They will also, as Dana highlighted with a few other cities, be trained in public safety through de-escalation tactics, and through that be able to reduce the possibility of dangerous interactions on vehicles for other riders in attendance. It is very, very difficult to de-escalate a situation when you are a police officer who is, again, carrying a gun and has the ability to drag you off to jail. And lastly, these transit ambassadors will be able to issue, importantly, civil citations only when required. So, and these civil citations will not exceed the cost of a parking ticket. Right now, if you evade a $2.50 fare, you can be given a $250 fine and be threatened with jail time. That does not in any way represent the scale of the issue we're dealing with. We need to decriminalize fare evasion, as was previously mentioned, and move to a situation where the cost for fare evasion it's a punishment, but is not possibly life-ruining.
So as Cameron talked about what the vision for ambassadors is, we have to face what we have today, which is transit cops who do find themselves in the news fairly often. But you know, it's also not the headlines that always tell the full story. And that is really why it's so important that we listen to riders. I think we have a video of the Cleveland School CEO here telling the story of one of his students.
So I have a young man that I mentor who jumped on the health line and did not pay the $2.25 bus ticket. And he was wrong, but it's an honor system, and he took his chance, and he got busted. And so he ended up in our system. So if you think about what you would do if your teenager had gotten busted for a $2.25 bus ticket, you'd have intervened, and you'd have solved the problem. He ended up with a $5,000 warrant for his arrest for a bus ticket. And had I not found out, and I found out really at the 9th hour, he'd have been sitting 60 and counting for a bus ticket. That's why we need legal services and the health services and the mental health services. So I just wanted to give one real example, because it's easy theoretically to wonder, why do we need these things? Little tiny disruptions make huge pain points for our kids and families when you don't have the capital and the social capital that other families have. So
I think that the issue of, again, this thing that we've been talking about all night with the enormity of the fine in relation to the, amount of the fare is really highlighted by that clip. And now we're going to hear some stories about how transit police and how fare, unconstitutional fare enforcement and just general harassment from transit police have affected riders. So the first story we're going to hear is a video that we got from canvassing a few weeks back from a rider named Damon.
My name is Damon Jones. I had an interaction with the Rta Police before, and it was for a small ticket in Stowe that was unpaid, but actually they didn't have a fare stop at one of the transit stations. So I tried to get it down here. I had money in my pocket, and I just asked him, could I pay it over there? He wouldn't let me pay it. So instead, he radioed me in and did a warrant check, and it was a small warrant check, and I ended up going to jail that day unnecessarily. My name
Yeah, so spending a night in jail for, basically for asking of how to pay a ticket or how to pay a fare seems a little ridiculous to me. But transit police are also harassing riders in lots of other ways. A few weeks ago in preparation for this event, we got this story from a rider. So I'll just read that. I'm a Cleveland resident that has been taking RTA for over 10 years. A few years back, I was at the West Boulevard and Cutout Station. While exiting the building, a transit police cruiser that was parked in front had honked at me. When I looked into the car, the two officers inside began to whistle at me and catcall me. So thank you to that rider for sharing your story. Yeah, everyday harassment in seemingly minor ways still have a big impact on people. And so at this point, I'm going to open the floor to anyone who would like to share their experiences with transit police. If you have something you want to share, please type in the chat to be added to the speakers list. Also, if you don't feel comfortable speaking or being named, you can send me a chat privately and I can read out your story for the group. And when you do speak, if you could keep it to around 60 seconds, that would be great.
If I may, can I share with you a quick story?
Please.
While I was legal director at the ACLU, and some of you may realize the ACLU is just west of 55th Street, we had a couple of our law students riding the health line, one black, one white. The white one was a female, blonde hair, blue eyes, typical Karen. The black was a male, typical early 20 male. RTA police got on the health line bus, reached over the white girl to see whether or not the black male had his fare ticket. As it turned out, the white girl didn't have a fare ticket, but they never questioned her. But they wanted to question the black male, which was, in our opinion, indicative of, I don't know if it's implicit bias, it's probably closer to explicit bias. We complained to RTA, but they didn't have the tapes. But there was no question but that race is a factor in the manner in which they enforce the fare evasion policy. That's just a quick story. It never went anywhere because we didn't have the tapes, but I believed our two law students and they both told the same story. The black male was harassed while the white female was given a pass.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we had another story come in that was similar. So I'll just read those as well. So it was the first of the month and a daily commuter on the Red Line train, a well-dressed white male, got off at Tower City for work. The commuter made a mistake and they forgot their monthly pass at home. I know we've all been there. They were charged a $25 administrative fee to be paid within 72 hours. If they make that mistake again within the next 24 months, they will be charged with a criminal citation, a 4th-degree misdemeanor. And then there was another story of a few years ago, a black Healthline bus rider was charged with misconduct involving a public transportation system, a 4th-degree misdemeanor. The rider was never offered the $25 administrative fee by the transit officer, though the officer claimed that the rider declined the administrative fee. The rider had to spend 2 nights in jail before paying bond, and they were charged with nearly $200 in court costs as well as a misdemeanor. So they, this black rider who was riding the bus wasn't offered the same thing of a $25 administrative fee, which again is similar to a parking ticket. and instead had to spend 2 nights in jail. Yes, if anyone would like to share, that would be, please type it in the chat. But I believe our first writer to share their story will be Joe. Joe, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. About 2 years ago, I was in a homeless state. I became homeless. And what happened was, I was one of the people, I used to ride like the buses and trains all night long. I didn't have a place to stay, didn't have a place to sleep. But I always kept myself clean. I always occupied only one seat, and I was very courteous to everybody. But anyway, what happened was, one day, I basically used to ride the red line. It would go from Windermere all the way to the airport. On the way back one day, for whatever reason, the operator of the train, he told everybody that we had to get off at West Park Rapid Station. And I complied, everybody got off. So I was waiting there on the ramp, waiting on the next train to come by, because I always buy monthly passes. In the course of me waiting for the next train to come, I dozed off. I didn't lay down. I was, just sat, my head nodded and I dozed off. Perfectly natural. But anyway, I was woken up suddenly, and there were 4 transit police officers around me. So they didn't ask me who I was or did I have a pass or anything. What they said was, we caught you speaking. We caught you sleeping. We got you on camera. We took a picture of you. I need to see your ID. I'm giving you a ticket. So I gave you my ID. And I said, actually, I was just closing my eyes, resting. I wasn't really sleep. And he basically told me that it's against the law. Sorry about that. Somebody muted me. I guess it was an accident. Did everybody hear? What was the last thing you heard?
The last thing that we heard was that you said that you were just dozing off, and then.
Yeah, I just dozed off. I didn't lay down or anything. And like I said, well, I was woken up abruptly. There were 4 RTA officers around me. And they said that they had taken a picture of me. They caught me sleeping. So I politely told them, I said, I wasn't asleep. You might have just seen my eyes closed. They said, no, we got you on camera. I said, okay. So he wanted my ID. I gave you my ID. Then he asked me, do I have a bus pass? I gave him my monthly pass, and I had a disability pass. So my fare and everything was in order. I was where I was supposed to be, waiting on the next train. But they gave me a ticket for falling asleep. So I didn't argue with them. I went ahead and took the ticket. They left. So I was cited to court. And the reason I went to court, they wanted to fine me. I think it was, I want to say about $60 or $70, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I didn't feel I had broke the law. I didn't do anything. There was no crime reported. No crime occurred. There was no damage to any property. Basically what they were doing at nighttime, there are a lot of people that, they're homeless. They sleep like in the rapid transit stations, some on the train, some on the buses. What they were doing was they would tiptoe, and if they thought you were asleep, they would take a picture of you and then wake you up and issue you a ticket.
For sleeping?
Yes. So in my case, I was sitting up like this here, but they said they had a picture of me. They never showed it to me. They just showed me their phone and said, we got a picture of you. I had seen them before. Excuse me one second. Excuse me. Excuse me about that. Sorry about that. I had seen them do this to people before, where they tiptoe around, or sometimes they'll be in their car and they'll ride by and they might see a person sleeping and they'll take a picture and then get out and give them a ticket, you know. So I thought I hadn't did anything. I mean, first of all, I wasn't laying down. I was where I was supposed to be. I wasn't creating a problem. And like I said, no crime was reported, nothing happened. So I went to this lawyer named David King, and he agreed to represent me. So we went to court, and every time we would go to court, I would ask the judge, I would say, "Excuse me, Your Honor, can you please, no one has ever told me what crime I committed." And he said, "Well, what did you do?" I said, "I didn't do anything. They just woke me up and told me I had a ticket." You know, so he said, "Well, your lawyer should be able to tell you." So me and my lawyer, we did some investigating. There was no crime reported. Nothing ever happened. It's basically, they said they caught me sleeping. So then we checked into Ohio's law, and we found out that there was no law against sleeping. You know, if you're operating a motor vehicle, yes, or a dolly or something like that, yeah, you can get fired. Or if you hurt somebody, yeah, you can possibly face a criminal penalty. But just falling asleep, there was no law against it. We couldn't find one. So about our third or fourth court appearance, they had tried to offer us a plea deal. If I would plead guilty and go to some classes at Tri-C, and I just told him, I said, "Hey, I never did anything. I mean, nothing happened. Why should I plead guilty to something when nothing occurred?" I mean, you know. So I declined their offer. So the judge set the trial for, you know, the judge set a date for a jury trial. So on the day of the trial, me and David came in the courtroom, and you know, we're waiting to pick our jurors and to pick the jurors and everything, voir dire. And all of a sudden, the prosecutor came to David, whispered to him. Then the judge called David up, him and the prosecutor. And next thing I know, David came back and told me they decided not to pursue these charges. They're going to drop them. So the judge addressed me, called me up to the bar, and he told me the prosecution has decided to dismiss these charges against you. So I was happy, but I was also disappointed. I felt that what they were doing to me was unconstitutional. They were giving me a ticket for a law that never existed. Just everything was wrong. I wanted the court to issue a ruling barring the police from continuing to do this kind of stuff, but it never occurred because the prosecutor dropped it. So it was a partial victory for me.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It's not illegal to sleep. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what specific charges did they file against you? Was it disorderly conduct, being drunk and disorderly? There had to be some specific charge if you were in court and you were ready to fight. Do you know what that was?
Yes, the name of the charge was criminal trespassing.
Oh, trespassing. Okay, that was the charge.
Criminal trespassing.
But you had, as I understand it, you had a pass to be on the bus or train. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you couldn't be trespassing if you had a pass to be on the train.
That is correct.
Okay, I understand now.
Right, and like I said, nothing happened. There was no report of a crime or suspicious behavior. It was just a matter of them. They had nothing to do at nighttime but go around and try to harass people, give them tickets or mess with people, or you know what I mean? So, like I said, it's still going on to this day. Anytime you have the police interacting with people who are of low income or people who don't have much, you know, you're going to have that kind of harassment. It's sad to say, but it's just the way it is. In America, and I imagine in most countries where, you know, that's what the police do. They're not there to harass the wealthy and the powerful. They're there to basically keep the the low income, those in poverty, the powerless, to keep them in check. And what
Therein lies a big problem with our system. You were lucky enough to have an attorney that agreed to represent you. And I don't know if you paid him any money or not, but the reality of the situation is that most people who get tickets or citations for trespassing, disorderly conduct, fare evasion, whatever you want to call it, they don't have the resources to hire an attorney. If the fine is $250, that's probably what most attorneys charge per hour. So the average person, even the person who is employed, doesn't have the resources to get an attorney to represent him or her in a misdemeanor case. That's the flaw. Now, we do have a system by which people who cannot afford an attorney can have an attorney appointed for them free of charge. But that's a crapshoot also. You may get F. Lee Bailey, or you may get someone who graduated from law school yesterday. Many of them are very good. Many of the public defenders are very good at what they do. Others don't really care and don't have the time. But that's a big problem with our criminal justice system.
Yes, I agree with you. And that's only a small part of the problem. It's not only do you have to pay the tickets, the fine for the ticket, you also have to pay court costs.
Of course.
So you're talking about, like in my situation, falling asleep for a few minutes or maybe some seconds or whatever it was, I could have wound up paying about $300. You know, so you take a person that can't afford that, even if they plead guilty, now they have a court-ordered fine over their head now. If they don't pay that $300, or if they miss a payment, they can be arrested. You know, so like I said, basically it goes back to taking advantage of the powerless. That's basically what they're doing. Like I said, no crime occurred, and something else is ironic. During the Arctic temperatures, when it's like dangerous to be outside, RTA opens up its transit stations for the homeless. They could stay in there and sleep all night. So basically what they were doing, this wasn't during Arctic temperatures, but they were violating their own policy also. They just wanted to mess with somebody. And like I said, nothing happened. I mean, you know, I was very respectful to them. I didn't do anything. It was just a matter of, I became a target to them, profiling. I fit their profile of a low income person. You know, it seems like from its inception, RTA was not really built for the low income. It was built to benefit the prosperous and the wealthy people. There's no problem with them parking their cars there and going downtown to avoid, you know, paying parking fares or parking meters. There's no problem in that. It's just, and these people never get harassed. If you notice, the people in the business suits, they never get stopped. I seen the gentleman on the video here. He didn't have a suit on. He had a sweatshirt on. You know, so, you know, to the police, the way they're trained, this is a low income person. You know, this person is a threat to society. Why? Well, because of his skin color, the way he's dressed. I might even hear some rap music coming from him. Hey, we got to find a reason to criminalize this guy some kind of way. Does he have fare? Yes. Okay. Does he have warrant on him? Yes. Okay. But what was your reason from going to him in the first place? It was because of his skin color and his style of dress.
No,
Joe, you're exactly right.
Discriminate, but I feel what you're saying, and it's been 400 years we've been fighting this battle. Hopefully, we'll solve it before 400 more years go by.
I don't know. You know, I don't know. You know, the system is in place, and to be honest with you, people have been fighting it now for 400 years. We've had some small games, but it's been like individual games. It hasn't been where the whole community.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Joe. And I hate to interrupt you, but we have to keep going. Your story was excellent. You hit on some important topics of class and race that I'm sure other stories will touch on, but we want to hear some other stories as well. Thank you so much for sharing, Joe.
Well, thank you for allowing me to share it. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. Again, thanks, Joe, so much for sharing. Yeah, really highlights everything that we're talking about here. Brittany, I believe that you had a story that you collected from canvassing. If you'd like to share that.
Yeah, this is actually another story that was after canvassing. It was last Friday, actually. I was leaving my office to go to another office in Ohio City, and I saw an interaction between an African-American male, low income, you could tell. Basically, there was two transit police officers that had him cornered and were talking to him, and I parked my car and decided I was just going to walk to my destination. And in the meantime, I was going to stop in that area to see what was going on. Mind you, I am a transit rider, but I do not ride transit regularly, only when I have the opportunity, as I actually live in Akron and commute to Cleveland for work daily. So when I do have the opportunity to ride the bus, I do, but not an everyday thing. So this was actually my first up close and personal interaction with Rta Transit Police, and I will say, I hope I never have to interact with them again. But there's a guy, he was sitting there low income, he looked a little troubled, looked sad. I began recording because at this point in time, dealing with the police, that's just something I do. Everything that's going on in the news, I think that my best bet is to make sure that any interaction is documented. So I started to record the interaction, and I kept a pretty far distance and minded my business for the most part. I didn't say anything out of line. I don't even know if the officers even noticed that I was there. The guy did, because the officers backs were to me, but the guy was looking directly at me. So I began recording, and then I got closer as I saw the cops going to issue him a citation. So that's when the cop realized that I was recording, and initially he told me basically to get away. And I told him that I was not going to get away and that I was going to continue recording. So he told me that if I didn't get away, he was going to arrest me. And I asked him why. And he said, because I was standing too close to him. Mind you, if I was waiting on a bus, that would be exactly where I would be standing. I was standing within proximity of a bus stop. I was not doing anything I shouldn't be doing, just minding my business. And the situation just kept escalating as he became more and more disrespectful with me and belittling with me. Finally, he finished issuing the citation and decided to handle me. And talking to me just out of control. So I asked him for his identification, and he refused at first. And he said, you can look at my badge and you can write down my name. And I was like, I would rather just have a business card. That would make me a little bit more comfortable. But finally, he let the guy go, and he walked me back to the cruiser and gave me his business card, and that ended. So I went back and I talked to the guy and I asked him what had happened and why that interaction happened. And he still seemed pretty shaken, and he was saying basically like, let's just let this go right now while they're still here. I'll give you my information. You can call me later. So I got the guy's information and I called him, and I found out that he was actually being stopped for an open container. What had happened was he got off the bus. He had popped his beer while he was arranging his things to walk home. And that's when the Rta Police stopped him and issued him a ticket. Long story short, I mean, he got the ticket. He said, he was going to have to pay the fine, and it was what it was. And he felt that he was wrong for having an open container. My takeaway from the story was a little bit different, though. I felt that, first of all, it was an instance of policing poverty. Nothing else. It was for sure an instance of that. Another thing I wondered was, is this an instance where we need 2 squad cars and 2 officers locking this man in, 2 armed officers at that. Also, I thought it was an overreach, given that we're in Ohio City. There's surveillance cameras everywhere. That is a known fact. And during the interaction, I saw about 3 city police drive by. So I was just thinking maybe they could have probably handled the situation. As Josiah said earlier, it was just very redundant, in my opinion. Overall, the experience really opened my eyes to the injustices that transit riders face daily in regards to transit police. And I believe that civilian safety ambassadors would be a much better option. And that's my entire story.
Thank you for sharing, Brittany, and thank you for stepping up and, videotaping those police officers and making sure that person was taken care of and putting yourself at risk as well. And being willing to document that is really important. I want to take a minute to highlight a story that we have in the chat here. So I'll just go ahead and read that aloud. When I was in high school, I often caught the Red Line Rapid Train and 1415 bus to and from Tri-C for the remainder of my courses. I got stopped almost every time I rode public transportation and asked by transit police to show my fare card. Once talking with friends from the suburbs who caught the Green Line about how annoyed I was by my treatment, I learned they were never stopped and asked for their fare cards. I knew then that there was a disproportionate impact on inner city folks than those from the suburbs. And I think that that's also really, again, really highlights that, transit goes all the way out to the airport, goes all the way out to West Park. And yet I rarely see transit police all the way out there, and they're always, around Tower City and East Cleveland and in those areas for no good reason. At this point, I'd like to send it over to Chris Stocking to close us out here.
Not a great time, buddy.
All right, yeah. Thank you everyone so much for sharing your stories. I did want to close this out with some calls to action, and I'll pass it over to Brittany for a moment.
So at this point in the presentation, we want to do our demands. I will say that we invited members of the RTA board, and as you can see, none of them are here. That just speaks volumes to how they feel about this issue and a possible resolution. With that said, we'll keep going though. We do have a representative from the city council, and I would like to shout that person out at this time. We have Councilman Slife on the line. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin our demand section. Our first demand will be for the city of Cleveland. We demand the decriminalization of fare evasion. Our representative from the city of Cleveland, are you present? And if so, would you be willing to do this?
Sorry, I'm putting my kid to bed, but I'm listening.
It's all good. Did you want to respond to our demand, and or you can wait to the end and offer some sort of comment? That's an option as well.
I plan to speak to Councilman McCormick about it. I am not well versed on the legislation he's introduced.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We will definitely be following up with you. The rest of our demands are for the GCRTA board, which are as follows. We are calling on GCRTA to finally fully reckon with the true meaning of the Groves decision. Our first demand calls for transit safety ambassadors. We demand that the RTA board create a safety ambassador program to replace armed fare enforcement. Since we have no members present, we will go on to our next demand. Our next demand is for a reduction in the police budget. The RTA police budget has doubled since 2006. RTA has over 125 officers, while Pittsburgh has higher ridership and only 50 officers. Our final demand of RTA board members is in an effort to heal the health line. We demand the reinstatement of all door boarding on the health line, an action made even more important in the context of social distancing and the pandemic. And that concludes our demand section. I will pass it over to Chris.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, and this call to action, you can see we didn't have any RTA board members that found it worth their time just to join us here tonight on a cold, rainy night, just calling into a Zoom call. 10 people could not find it worth their time to talk about this issue and to hear about what Joe and other riders have been through. So this isn't the end, this is the start of a larger campaign. And we need you all to win. You know, we needed everyone to get Public Square reopened, if you remember that back in 2017. And we needed everyone, you know, making calls and joining us to get this all-day pass back down to $5. These are some of the wins that we've had because riders have made it happen over the past few years with Clevelanders for Public Transit. So we're calling on you. If you have experience with transit police or know anyone that has, you know, feel free to call or text us at 216-714-2164, or you can email us. We're also on social media. And what we like to do to launch this campaign, I don't know if everyone's aware, but 2021 next year is City of Cleveland elections. All 17 city council seats are up, as well as a mayoral seat. Mayor of Cleveland appoints the largest share of the RTA board, 4 out of 10 members. And we demand that the mayor that's going to be elected next year will appoint board members that will support civilian transit ambassadors and support transit funding with the transit the street hard around these demands. And we'll definitely be reaching out to everyone that's on the call tonight to see if you could join us just one-on-one with another rider for some canvassing to hand out some materials and talk to other riders about these issues. We know it's a challenge with COVID-19 and everything going on, but we think that we can do it in a safe way. And we appreciate everyone's time tonight and can't wait to connect with you and really get things going as we go into these elections next year. So thank you everyone so much.